Welcome back, our self-made friends. It's Chris Crone.
And Grant Thompson. You may have asked the question, is it okay to use someone else's video in my video or somebody else's music? Today we're going to talk about that.
So today we're talking about plundering. We're talking about going and stealing other people's incredible intellectual property and taking advantage of it for our own personal use and gains.
Yeah, to some degree, but I think there are a lot of channels out there that want to make compilations. Is it okay to take a snippet of this person's video and this person's video and take some really awesome music and mash it all together?
It's the cat video, man. It's like everyone wants to do the funny cat and dumb things that animals do.
Yeah.
And they're always like stealing and creating their compilations of this on YouTube.
And to make a good video, you need some good music, and there's good music out there. So what are the rules? What are the legalities? How does YouTube view using music and other people's videos? And if you're making a video and you want to reference to somebody else's video, is it okay to take a segment of their video and put it in yours? What does it take to do that? Do you have any experience using people's music or videos?
I do. One of the things that I do know is that the moment I ever use music that I'm not licensed to use, then YouTube just mutes the entire video. I'm like, dang it. No, I learned that early on. And so one of the things that I learned is that I actually had to have copyright permission, or there's a lot of music that's royalty free that's out there. And so it's not always like the hippest jam. It's not always like the hits that are playing on the radio. But I've also gone and bought music, the free stuff. You can find some good things out there, and then the reality is that it's just kind of okay. But I've paid $50, $80, $100 for some rock and jam music that I now have the rights to. I can use it on YouTube. I can use it anywhere I want. I even had YouTube once flag that music and say, can you prove that you have copyrights for this? And we sent it in all right, all good. So my experience has largely been with how to use music appropriately.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to put it to you this way. YouTube wants you to use 100% original content. That means any graphics, any animations, any video content, any music should ideally be made by you. If at any point in time you're reaching out and you're grabbing something from somewhere else, whether it's from a Google search or downloading music or copying somebody's video, you are at risk of copyright infringement. But there are different levels of that risk that I want to talk about. Now, YouTube has a really awesome content ID system. It's really fantastic at crawling back through all these hours of videos that have been uploaded, videos in the past and videos in real time, and finding out if you're actually using people's music inappropriately. In some cases, you may actually have a license for the music that you're using, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And in that case, you'll usually get a notice that pops up saying, can you provide proof? Now, what they've done in the past is they'll put your monetization on hold until you can actually verify it. And if you can verify it, then everything will resume as normal. But let me talk about some safe practices that will help keep you out of trouble if you do choose to deviate from your 100% original content and start including somebody else's. So number one, if you're going to use somebody else's video, it's a very, very good idea to reach out to that person who made it and see if you can get permission. Get permission from them if you can, and if possible, get that permission in writing. Usually if you're using the video in a way that promotes them, that looks good, that gives them a shout out, they're going to have no problem giving you access to that video, especially if you're just using parts of it. Obviously they're not going to want you to use the whole thing, but that becomes a negotiable point. If you reach out and get permission, you can pretty much do whatever you want because you have the permission from the copyright holder. If content ID is going to be an issue, if you have so much of their video that you're at risk of getting flagged by the content ID system, you can usually have them disable content ID for that video on your channel. So it will exclude that, and they can do that through their rights managers.
Grant, have you ever used a snippet of video from anyone else in one of your own?
I certainly have. And the times where you can't get a hold of somebody, there is a little bit of risk in doing that. But there are some clips. For example, I was at the Polynesian Cultural Center in Hawaii. I was working with this guy named Cap. He's a good friend of mine. He's the guy that climbs the palm trees and cracks coconuts. Really good guy. And I was doing a video all about something to do with coconuts. I can't remember off the top of my head what we were doing with coconuts.
You're probably exploding them knowing you.
So anyway, I wanted to talk a little bit about this process. I think we were making a coconut candle, and I wanted to talk about how you could use coconut milk. And I didn't have footage of that, being where we were at in our studio, we didn't have access to coconut milk from a coconut. So I just went online, I found one of Cap's videos where he was squeezing the coconut milk, and I used about a 1-second clip of that in my video, just as some B-roll footage, just to give the viewer some context. Now, my general rule of thumb, what I've seen, and I'm not recommending this is right or the right way to do it, but what I've seen is if you use about 4 seconds or less of a clip, it's not going to be enough to trigger content ID, and it's not going to be enough to really trigger people in general. If you don't have permission, it could be a potential copyright point where if the owner of that video came back to you and wanted you to take the video down, you might have to. Now, in the case where I used that little footage of Cap, I actually blew it up so the footage was bigger. You couldn't recognize who it was. All you saw is these Hawaiian or these Polynesian feet and some coconut milk, right? But my viewers watching the video, some of them recognized what that was from. They went back to the person that made the video and they said, hey, look, he's using some of your video footage. So they actually emailed me and they're like, hey, we noticed that you're using this. And we worked out a deal where I gave them a little shout out in the description in return. So I would say, number one, always reach out and see if you can get permission. Number two, if you're willing to take the risk that your video might be flagged, demonetized, taken down, and you get a copyright strike, then you may just go ahead and put it in your video. Just realize the risks that you're taking for that. If you do, usually 4 seconds or less of the video is probably the safer way to go.
There's another version of copyright that has nothing to do with music or video, but it has everything to do with content. There's a lot of other people out there that have, they've produced a video, they put a lot of time, effort into it, and then they've created some great success with it. And I've noticed that a lot of other people, they're going to jump on that bandwagon and they're going to want to produce something similar. And I think it's super important. And this is something that I like to do. I like to actually see what's hot, what's popular, what's out there. And there's a difference between literally just stealing someone's content, and then there's a difference between actually producing your own, commenting on it. And the most important thing that I would recommend there is make sure you always give credit where credit is due. Sometimes we want to be the hero and pretend like, I came up with this. But the reality is if you didn't, you should own up to that 100%. And as Nate and I have been out there, as my manager has gone out there and find similar videos that have done well, he said, hey, Chris, let's comment on this and let's do a shout out to this creator. And what that's led to is I've had a couple of those creators come back and be like, dude, Chris, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate the shout out. Thank you so much for sharing your opinion on the topic. And I'm also going to tell you that I have produced a couple of videos where I've gone up and I've attacked some pretty notable individuals out there when I had a different opinion than them. And it's always gotten me a lot of views. But even just recently, I've started thinking, what would happen if I built on our commonalities versus our differences and maybe made room for some collaborations rather than actually trying to make enemies that are out there? What would happen if with some of these people I found out where we were similar and where we were different? And I think that there are some ways that you can show up and you can be respectable when you're referring to other people, or you can also be disrespecting. And I think you can get views on both of them. But I think that living in a friendly world with a reputation where you've got the ability to do shout outs to these people in a way that they would say, hey, that was respectful. Maybe we can do some things together. As you get bigger, I think that's something that's personally important to me. So I guess what I'm saying here is make sure that you're giving credit where credit is due when it comes to copyrights with actual content. Friends, thank you for watching this video, and the rest of it is coming up next in the next video.
In the meantime, if you can't wait to get started, we have a link down in the description where you can take our self-made training today.